Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Game Brigade. I am Bryan, and today we're going to be diving into Kingdoms Forlorn and talking about whether or not this is a game you should be backing, or kind of diving deeper into some of the mechanics to help people understand maybe what they are looking at, because this Kickstarter page is very expansive and vast, and there's a lot of detail information that might be easily skipped or missed. And so I know for myself, I had a heck of a time going through this campaign, and I think it's a really cool game, but there's a lot of details that might be easily missed. So we're going to kind of talk about those to help you guys make the best decisions in your backing decisions, whatever. What am I trying to say? So let's go ahead and just go ahead and pull up the campaign page. So right off the bat, we're at basically $900,000 with 5,454 backers. And this is brought to us by Into the Unknown. If you are new to backing Kickstarter games, I always like to check out the creator, see what kind of projects they've worked on. This is still a relatively new company, Into the Unknown, with their major release being Aeon Trespass Odyssey. And we are still currently waiting on this, but I always like to come in here, check out the comments, see if the creator is active, which they are. Actually, they're very active in their campaigns, which is good, just to get a kind of pulse on, are they updating their campaigns and what is currently happening. So it looks like the last update for this one was January 27th, 22. So they're a little coming close to another update. Usually monthly updates is what we're looking for, but I highly recommend doing that as a red flag check whenever you're backing a campaign. So back to Kingdoms Forlorn. This game is an expansive dungeon crawl esque, boss battler esque narrative experience, big box game. In fact, they have a pretty good descriptor right here: a truly tactical dungeon crawler. We'll talk about that. A truly cooperative adventure. We'll talk about that. And a truly narrative driven board game. Again, it's hard to say what a truly narrative driven board game is without actually playing it, because the narrative experience is hard to gauge whether if it's good or bad based on the writing. So Kingdoms Forlorn, what is it? You're going to hear a lot of people throwing terms like Kingdom Death Monster, Boss Battler, and yes, it borrows some ideas from a boss battler, but it's not truly a boss battler. There's a lot more going on here, and I would say they actually take a lot of examples from their previous game, Aeon's Trespass, Aeon's Odyssey Trespass, and have brought it into here. I think King of Average had a good idea where they called it 2.0 for that system. And so in this game, you're going to be playing a knight, and there's going to be several other knights involved in your game. Originally, it was going to be requiring you to have all 4 knights in the game. And so this is where they're talking about this immersive co-op experience slash solo experience, because you are you can't truly play solo. They've added a true solo mode now, but originally you were going to be playing your knight, and your knight has a personal goal, part of their story, their immersive story that they're trying to complete in this specific mission. And so as you go into that mission, while yes, you're working with these other knights, everyone has their own objective. So that is part of your personal narrative story, and the decisions and the outcomes that happen throughout that mission will affect your narrative campaign. They talk about tactical escalating battles. This is something they've talked about with Aeon's End Odyssey, Aeon's End, ATO. I'll say ATO. It's easier to an acronym, that one, where basically as you're dealing damage to your monsters, as you're fighting, instead of following a simple AI system where they do the same thing, they will either escalate to be more difficult, or the system has a customized AI so that you are not fully expecting exactly how the monsters will react, and we'll talk about that a little more. But before we dive too much further, we're going to talk about the contents of the game and see what are we looking at getting. As we can see here from this initial splash screen, it's a very expansive game. In fact, this layout is probably not how I would play it. And from everyone I've seen playing it, the battle board here is going to be off to the side, and then your delve board will be way over here, and we'll talk about those a little later too. And then we have Breaking Down to the Pledge, the core game, coming in at $159, 139 euros. And so the way this game is broken down, so that you'll understand, is they have Principality of Stone and the Sunken Kingdoms. The way the idea of Kingdoms Forlorn is you're going to have these regions of this the land, different kingdoms, and several kingdoms have been afflicted with some sort of curse. Each kingdom having its own curse, and for a long time, these kingdoms were surrounded by a fog or something, that really made it difficult for people to venture in and explore these older kingdoms. But now that fog is lifting, and so adventurers are able to go in and explore, maybe look for treasures, look for adventure, look for whatever it may be that they're purposely looking for, kind of like a knight errant. We're looking for something to do. And so right now the core game has two of these potential kingdoms that we can adventure in. The Principality of Stone, which is basically a land that everything has been turned to stone, so all the residents and the people are going to be affixed and stuck in their location of where they were when the curse struck. Some animals or some things were able to adapt to the curse, kind of like, say, adapting to radiation or something. They were able to figure out a way to survive, but it has afflicted them in some way. And then we have the Sunken Kingdom, which is going to be like a kingdom that's been swallowed by a swamp, and everything, as you can imagine, a swamp or a bog may come from that. So these are the two core game kingdoms in the game. And then we're going to go on down. We see that we have 5 knight miniatures. These are what are included in the game. We have Kara. She's this girl right here. We have Sir Sanch. I believe it's this guy with the monkey. Renholder, the guy with the antlers, who I probably want to be playing. Renholder, this crazy little mage. Freischreiter. I don't even know where he is in here. And then Priscilla, because Priscilla, I believe, is this person back here. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, so that's them right there. No, this is Freischreiter. This is the guy with the antlers. What am I talking about? And Renholder is this guy. Yeah. And this is Parcella back here. So those are the 5 knights that we're able to play. Each knight has a different story and how they're going to play and evolve and go through. And then we have our 3 saint miniatures. Not a total ton of detail about what these guys are going to do. Obviously, they're a work in progress. I do know that they're going to have additional side missions regarding these saints as we play through. And then we're going to get to an interesting take here, is that they're going to be doing standees here for several of the mobs. So we have 30 mob standees, which will include 10 Ironclast dead. These are going to be basically shamblers, skeletal dudes. We have Fistmans of the Ruins, these monkeys wearing armor. Rat Wolves, Haunts. I love these pumpkin head monstrosities. Like, I love Halloween. I love that kind of gothic Halloween vibes. So these pumpkin head monstrosities are totally up my alley. And then we're going to go on down here to the vassal miniature. So you're going to have the vassals. You're also going to have some bosses and kings eventually. So we have our egghead here. We have Knights of the Fen. This is a perfect example of like what a bog miniature would look like in that swamp where these people have been just swallowed and they've become part of the swamp. I think that's so cool. And we have a devil here, the Smelted Fears. And then we're going to come on down here to some of these kings with just some incredible design here. The puppet king Eldhard, you can see him sitting in his throne. Above him there's a puppet hand kind of manipulating him. But what I love about the design of this miniature and the thought behind the design here is, yes, he's raising his sword, he's kind of looking aside, but the fact that he's got his arm raised and you see it's kind of limp does kind of play in the fact that he's being manipulated and whatnot. I think that's such a cool aesthetic design that you really should be props to the designer who created this mini. It's huge too. This is going to be a huge, tall mini. This one right here, the King Laid Low, definitely a weird, it's one of those like nightmare dream things. Like, what is even going on here? I don't know. He's got his throne thing here. It's who knows what the heck's going on. And then we're going to go on to some of these dragons. We've got the Panzer Dragon. There are some aesthetic choices with the Panzer Dragon that I'm not totally in love with. Mainly his egg helmet here. It took me a while to figure out what was going on with his eyeballs here. Like, what is this? It's like an egg eyeball. But it's actually a armor. He is fully clad in armor. And this is a piece of armor helmet that the dragon is wearing. Personally, I would prefer this not being on the dragon. I'm okay with all the other armor pieces, but it's just not aesthetically what I'm looking for, but it's okay. And then we go down here, we have some more princess cards and miniatures. These are things that we can interact with. And I think it's interesting they broke it down to a part 1, part 2. And this is just talking more about what's the components. Most of the stuff is pretty standard. There's a few things that I want to make sure we're pointing out in terms of what we're receiving. First off, 400 battle cards. This is can be your AI, your body part, your traits, and your variants. When we talk about the AI in the body part, so as I mentioned earlier in the combat system, let's say, for example, you fight a mob of monsters. So the ironclad dead, we talked about them just a little earlier ago. Generally in dungeon crawlers, there's going to be a stat sheet that says, okay, these guys have 5 health, they move for 3, and they roll an attack dice, whatever. That's pretty common to what we've seen in almost every dungeon crawling game. But this one's going to have a little difference. It's actually going to have a deck of AI cards that's going to give what these mobs are going to be doing. And I think it even breaks it down even further with the body part to say, yes, you're fighting a mob of ironclad dead, but these ironclad dead are unique in terms of the individual units of who is in that ironclad dead. Maybe you have one that's a healer, maybe you have one that's a wanderer, for example, and that's what's kind of going to be showing through the body parts. Now, I'm not 100% sure, and I've not played this game. Remember that I've not played the prototype, nor have I seen the actual physical copies of that prototype. But basically what I've gathered from the campaign is that's how it's going to work, is you're going to have the AR cards talking about how the systems are going to work, and then the body part cards for the mobs are kind of dictating what you're going to be actually facing against. But 400 plus cards, that's a good amount of cards to be playing with. And then we have 460 knight cards. This will be your gear, your arc, and your skill. Now, we have 5 knights currently in the game, so 460 divided by 5, that's quite a bit of cards per knight that you can play with for specific gear, arc, and skills that you're going to be having access to. So I'm really excited about that. I'm actually okay with just 5 knights if there's a lot of variety in terms of the gear or the skills that we can utilize to play the game. And then here are the map tiles, and we didn't really get a good picture of this earlier in the campaign, but this is something I really want to highlight because it's actually one of my favorite features of this board game. Taking us back to another game I really enjoyed, Destinies by Lucky Duck Games, one of my favorite parts of that game were the map tiles you would lay out as you explored the kingdom and eventually, went through different areas and explored and whatnot. This has a very similar idea where you're going to have a crossroads, and then you're going to explore off that crossroads, drawing cards, building up. So you're going to either go like north, east, south, west. So in this example, they went south, revealing this new tile, which will have an encounter, might generate your threat, might do, give some sort of token, and then they come down here to a larger tile. And effectively, the larger the tile, the more threat you're going to be gaining, as well as the probability or likelihood of you finding the final boss. And in this game, the idea is that you are going to be looking for clues, as we talked about earlier, for your knight in terms of what are we looking for, what is my knight specifically looking for, but you're also going to be looking for the boss. We're trying to find that final boss, and there is a possibility that you could draw your deck and run out of time before eventually finding the boss, and in that case, you fail. You don't necessarily die, but the mission failed and you'd have to start over again. So this is that idea. I love the idea of building out your map, it kind of being kind of defined but not defined. It's interesting to me in this regard. Now, with that though, is when you reveal these cards and you've done all the things here, you're then going to draw a card, which is going to be like an event card. It's going to tell you something may happen. So that's going to be very random. So it's not going to be a fully sculpted narrative campaign where you're being guided down a story. It's still going to have random elements that are going to change how this game is going to evolve. And then we're going to have some dice. Dice looks fine, looks like standard dice that you'd have with rounded edges. And then 160 various tokens. That scares the hell out of me. 160 tokens. I really hope that they are clear and there's like a definable use for each token. Another game that I played that I had a hell of a time with because of the amount of tokens was Wild Ascent. It's just a million tokens, and this is including 160 of them. This Only reason I'm bringing it up is because it can be a bit fiddly or hard to store if there isn't a pre-thought out plan in terms of how are we going to want the players to interact with these tokens. So that's a lot. 160 is quite a bit. And then we have the different battle boards. So coming back up here, we're exploring, we're looking for the boss. Let's say we find the boss. Then it's going to convert to a region where you're then going to have the boss battlers. So this is where people are kind of referring to those boss battlers like KDM and whatnot, where you're actually going to have an arena-like event. This sounds cool. They're going to have probably several. They have the Panzer board plus the Panzer bridge. Now, there's going to be more with some of the stretch goals we've seen plus expansions. My only fear with these is that you could be digging in and having to find the specific map. It might just increase more lag time in the game, but it shouldn't be too bad of a deal. And then we have some of these night trackers talking about the threat, the curse. If you reach 10 threat and go over to 11, the game ends. Or if you reach 5 curse and go over, then the game ends as well. The curse is effectively the land, kind of like I talked about with that radiation. How is it affecting you? Is it the negative impacts of that curse? And the threat is how much threat are you causing in the land? In terms of the population or the people living in that area, how are they responding to you? So that's all of that. Now we've got a whole bunch of other stuff they've thrown down here with new mechanics, the follower mechanic, the hunt of that side quest I was talking about with the Saints, whole bunch of content all laid into the core box. So now we're going to go on down, man. We're moving along. We're at the 10,000 Succulent Fears Deluxe expansion. So there's currently only 2 pledge levels. You either get the core or you get the core plus this expansion. The 10,000 Succulent Fears Deluxe expansion is adding a new region, the Schwartz and the Ancient Ruins. And this is going to be adding some miniatures, replacing some of the standees. And I really wish there was a deluxeified option, because now we're going to have Ironclad Dead miniatures here to replace those standee ones. But we still have standee versions of everything else, while we're going to have miniature versions. So it's an interesting thing that they're doing here. And I expect to see some sort of solution before the end of the campaign. Are we going to have all miniature options if we just want to play with our miniatures? Or what am I going to do with having all these extra minis as well as standees? It's an interesting take, and I'm wondering how they're going to handle that with the total storage solution, because if I have miniatures, I don't really need the standees, especially if they're acrylic. I think it's wasteful. I'm not going to use them. So that's tangent aside, we'll keep moving across. We have another knight in this expansion, the Stone-Faced Knight. You can read more about him, as well as some more vassals, more bosses for us to fight. I really like the look of the Night Eater mini here. I think he looks really neat. The Stone Mason Knight sounds really cool. Again, the Bog Witch looks exactly what I imagine a Bog Witch would look like, being surrounded by muck and grime and moss, and you got tree branches and roots coming out of her. Just incredible. And then we have the Young Devourer Dragon, and this guy will actually feature the battle inside him. He will eat the knights, and we will fight inside of his gut, which is so incredibly cool. And then we're going to come on down. So now we have another add-on here. We have the Barony of the Bountiful Harvest. I believe this is another kingdom. So we're looking at our 3rd kingdom now. And this one's going to include Delphine, the Grim Gardener Knight miniature, just out there trimming the bushes. And this one looks very similar to a region that is afflicted by plants and bugs. And if you remember, there's a video game on PS4 called Last of Us, where the people kind of like have plant heads. That's what some of these guys really reminded me of. Just completely plant-headed out. And we have one King in Bloom miniature. Look how cool this is. Just fully decked out in plants and whatnot. The painting of this would be so incredible cool if you could just get a really good painter on that. And then we're going to have some more dragons. And these dragons were added just recently, adding a few more dragons to some regions. So we're going to keep on moving down. So through this, they have added a lot. They've changed a lot. And this is one of the things I was having a hard time with setting up this video and kind of figuring out how I wanted to plan it, is because they have so many new features they keep adding it in. Plus the campaign page is very deep in terms of how much they want to do. So they have the spotlight section. I'm not going to go into too much of this, but I definitely would recommend someone, if you were interested in a specific section, to come in. You can click on this for monster variety, and it'll go ahead and take you into that. We've already kind of talked about this, where it talks about the decks. So I've already tried my best to explain some of this stuff. But if you really wanted more information, I would highlight the spotlight section and click on a specific one. For example, true solo mode. I was going to talk about this, so I guess we can talk about it now. The true solo mode has been added in now, where originally you could play solo, but you had to multi-hand the other knights, because you always had to have 4 knights or in the game. That's how it was balanced. Well, now they're doing a true solo mode where instead of playing with the knights, they're actually going to be removing those knights and adding in squires, basically giving additional benefits and effects to the battle that are handled by an AI, but they're also going to be affecting you through your campaign. So this is going to be an interesting take. As you're going through in the story, in the normal game, if you have other players, based on where you want to go, because remember, each region will take you to a different clue, and we're all looking for our own clues. Well, these squires are going to try to influence you as well, and try to send you in different directions. And you can, they talk about how you can force them. You can assert your dominance and show recklessness in choosing your own direction by not listening to the squires, but you'll be losing vigor or gaining threat respectively with that. I think it's an interesting take. I'm not necessarily sure. Like, if I'm playing solo, I want to play the game how I want to play it. And if the squires in my game are telling me to go one way, I'm like, no, I want to go another way, I might just play the game how I want to play it. But again, I always say to, try the game like how it's meant to be played originally first before making your own decisions. But this talks about the solo. So now solo mode is available. You're basically going to be adding in AI squires, filling in the slots for how the other players are going to be done. So that's that. And then we're going to come on down here. We have a bunch of stretch goals. Not quite as many stretch goals as I'd like to see in terms of monetary value. We're currently just at this. We've actually fallen because Toad Dragon has been unlocked, but our pledge level has fallen a little bit since then. We're most likely going to break this 1 million mark for the standee miniature transmutation. I'm hoping that means they're going to basically say, hey, all the standees are now minis. It's going to piss off a bunch of people, though. It's going to piss off a fraction of the people who like standees. We'll see how that goes. But I'm suspecting that's what they're going to do. And then they have more information about the outposts and the different followers that you can meet. Again, this is all being wrapped into that massive narrative campaign that it's hard for me to tell you what it's like because I haven't seen the actual narrative experience or felt it. They do say that every night is going to have around 25 to 30 individual hours. And then after you finish the campaign, your knight will then have additional play and unlocks available to them. So what I mean by that is, let's say you play as Kara and you finish her campaign, you finish her story, you did about 27 hours of gameplay. Well, the way the designers have designed this game is you could pick up another knight and start working on another knight's story. Or you could just say, you know what, I want to keep playing Kara. That story was just the beginning of her story. And they're going to have a whole bunch of more unlocks and skills and gear that she could potentially unlock as you progress, which I think is incredibly cool. And with that, they talked about how you could take your knight and take it to another friend's house who has this game. So let's say you have a friend who's playing their own campaign, you have your own campaign, or you have your own game. You guys want to play together now. I could take my Kara with her unlocks and her story where she's at and bring it over to their house and just play with my knight set with all my own unlocks and whatnot. I think that's a really interesting take on that. So, coming on down here, I think we're about done. There's the pledge levels are so freaking long. They also have daily unlocks, by the way. So the monetary unlocks, yes, I don't care for how spread out they are, but they are giving us daily unlocks as well. So I like that when they do both. It makes it more fun for you to keep looking. Here's that belly of the beast board I was talking about, where you're going to get eaten by that dragon and taken inside his belly. It's going to be shown there. So I think overall, there's still so much campaign. I could sit here and scrolling for hours showing you all the different things, but I'm going to leave that for you guys. we're just going to kick back to my head, and I'm going to give you my final thoughts about this campaign and whether or not I'd recommend backing it, or who would I back this. If I were to back it, who would I think might enjoy this game? First off, I think that boss battler games are very fun. I really enjoy them. I like the idea of learning the system, learning the fight. And in this game, the boss battler mechanic is not defined by the creature by itself, because there could be different ways that can implement how that boss reacts. Maybe one time you fight the Ignite will be charging you and slamming his head into things and just rushing you constantly. But the next time you fight him, he might be doing status effects and putting out dots and trying to affect you in other ways. And so you're going to have to adjust your strategy. You can't just play the same boss again and expect the same outcome, which I think is really cool. It changes it up a little bit. I also think that when you're fighting and they have body parts, and as you deal more damage to a specific body part, for example, the Ignite, we're trying to weaken his armor, knock his armor off so we can get to his vulnerable yoke side. That is always fun. And this game has, they have a special term for it, something paradigm, escalation paradigm, whatever. The idea of it, though, is as you deal more damage, the creature is going to get more difficult as you move through that fight. I think that's really fun and adds a really good element of combat. But on top of that, though, if you take that boss battler, because there's a lot of boss battlers out here that do that similar thing. On top of that, though, you're going to have a dungeon, and I would say dungeon, more of a kingdom exploring, a kingdom crawler, because you're going to be exploring the kingdom. You're going to be learning more about the world. And there is an overarching story per kingdom that you can uncover the truth behind it, or figure out what is happening to this kingdom. So there's more involved than just your character story. There's a bunch in the back end that you can uncover as well. So if you are a person who likes dungeon crawlers but likes a tactical combat strategy, so instead of just rolling dice and dealing damage burst on your character's status effect roll, there's more involved in that. I think you might like this game. But on conversely with that, it is a bit fiddly. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's going to be a very big game. So this is not going to be for the faint of heart. If you just need to be aware of that as you go into it, because there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in the overall system of the game, especially if you're playing it multi-handed with one or two nights or 3 nights or something like that. So just be aware of that. The overall scope of the game looks like they have a good grasp on it. I know that Into the Unknown has been doing a lot of playtesting with this. I have several friends that are part of that playtesting group. They're excited for the game. They tell me how great the game is developing and moving along. So I have a lot of confidence that the game is going to be a good game. Again, I haven't played it myself, though, so I don't know exactly how it's going to overall go. I expect we're going to have at least 2 more pledge levels coming in. We're probably going to have an all-in pledge, which is going to feature all of the gameplay all-ins. And then we're going to have an all-in, which is going to basically everything. You're going to include that art book. It's going to include probably sleeves and maybe, whatever, just a bunch of stuff. And I would suspect we're going to be looking around a $550 all-in pledge for this campaign. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Let me know. It took me a lot of time to research this game. Leave me a comment down below if you guys are backing this game. I'm currently backing it at the core level, just because I think it's a campaign I want to get involved in and play. But I'd like to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Again, also, thank you to all the new subscribers and all the people that joined the Discord. You are incredible. I thank you for joining the community. So welcome to the squad. And I will go ahead and wrap this up and leave it here. Leave a thumbs up to support the channel, and I will talk to you all later.